Hello and welcome to another edition of the book review here at CCXP Exam Simulator. This is Michael Bartlett and today I'm going to be reviewing Ignore Your Customers and They'll Go Away, the simple playbook for delivering the ultimate customer service experience. This book is written by Micah Solomon and it's published by HarperCollins Leadership. Now, before we get started, full disclosure, I agreed to do this review in return for Micah sending me a copy of the book. I've not been asked to give any particular, nothing was required of me in terms of saying certain things or making sure it was positive or anything like that. Micah literally just sent me the book and left it to me. So what you're going to hear are my honest thoughts and my top 10 takeaways. So my book notes are as follows. So he talks about automatic positivity. So what this means is do not say no unless you can find a yes to offer with the same breath. It's quite interesting that he brings this up because this just actually happened to me. So as you all know, I have this wonderful dog, a little beagle named Basil. And Basil's a big part of driving everything that I do. He because of him, I got into doing the dog rescue. So, literally from meeting that dog, there's been a cascade of effect that saved so many lives as a result. And he means everything to me. Well, recently, we thought he may have prostate cancer. So we actually had to do a 3-hour drive to go to the local university so that we could have some advanced testing run. Now, there's a hotel chain that we normally stay at. And my wife and I and the 3 dogs in our house will come, we'll go together. And so we just thought it would be business as usual. We arrived there and, I went to check in. And, of course, they said, do you have any dogs with you? And I said, yeah, I just got my little pack of 3. And the desk person looks at me and says, well, we have a 2-dog limit. Now, that wasn't anything I'd ever heard of before. When I'd been there, I'd always taken the 3 of them with me. So my jaw literally dropped at that point. I didn't know what to do, and she could see the surprise on my face, and she said, sir, I'm happy to make a one-time exception for you this time. And I said, well, thank you. Now, I do need to follow up with the university. I think that policy is a little ridiculous, but it is probably because someone did something crazy in there. And so there's another customer service book called The Customer Service Revolution, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. But the author sometimes says that businesses will set policies that are aimed against 5% of their customer base that do crazy stuff, and they end up impacting the 95% of the customer base that are good people and abide by the rules. So that may happen. But anyway, at least she did that. And there's plenty of examples I can think of with automatic positivity. I used to work for Accenture, and I do remember a team needed some help, and the guy came over and asked my boss, and my boss immediately said no. And I just didn't think that was appropriate, and I kind of worked with the guy, after hours to help him out with his problem. But, whether you're too busy or whatever the situation is, if someone's asking for help, there's got to be a way you can do something, even if it's, well, Mike's not available now, but maybe this other person can help you, or go talk to this team. Always try and offer some kind of a solution. Don't just say no. Micah says employees should be encouraged to exercise empowerment that is in favor of the customer. This is the opposite of situational tyrants. So a situational tyrant would be somebody in the situation that I just described, but who does it all the time. They kind of power trip off of their ability to say no. What we want is employees to be empowered to be able to say yes and to be able to solve the problem. And that kind of ties into the next point. He talks about a do-it-now service culture. So it's all about solving the problem. He gives an example in his book. I can't remember if it was Nordstrom or Zappos, but basically he had some shoes delivered to him, and the shipping company had made a mistake, and I guess the shoes turned up and they were drenched. And so Micah contacted the company that made the shoes, told them what happened. They took ownership of the problem, said, we're going to send a brand new pair to you right now. We're going to make sure that one of our own people couriers it over. They'll be with you in 45 minutes. This is in a distinct contrast to businesses that will blame each other. So shoe company blaming shipping company blaming shoe company, and the customer's just getting passed between the two of them, which I really hate that. In this day and age, I love the idea that the company that you have the initial contact with owns the service experience. And so I think that's a great example of the do-it-now service culture. He says, actually, this is a quote from the book that one of his case studies was talking about. Anybody can build themselves up for a good interview. So ask the receptionist and the garage attendant how the candidate treated them. And what this basically says, and I've seen this kind of thing, it's almost like a secret shopping thing I've seen before, where the business would leave a cell phone in the car, and they'd have a car specifically. It looked like a taxi company was picking the employee up and driving them to the interview. But actually, what they were doing was testing to see how honest they were, and if they would hand the phone in, little things like that. And in the examples he's using in the book, it's, they can look really good in the interview. Anybody can, but when they're off script, when they're just being themselves, how are these people? Because you want to make sure you're hiring people that are genuinely customer centric and really good people, service oriented people. And so you want people that are going to ultimately do the right thing. So I thought that was a great point, and it might be useful for people to consider that when they're having their job interviews. Is don't just ask the panel that interviews the candidate, maybe ask the people that the candidate passed in the hallway. Maybe set up little situations where maybe they have to wait in a room and someone wanders in to use the drinks machine and starts chatting with them. You just need to get a good feel for them when they're off script and off guard. He talks about watching out for a term called cause washing in corporate social responsibility efforts. And really what this means is make sure that the company is being authentic. Don't say that the business is behind a certain number of causes and donates money and believes in certain things if they don't, because all that will do is breed resentment amongst employees. We're seeing with the younger generation now, particularly the millennials and the Zoomers, that they're very committed towards certain social causes, and they want to work for employers that have the same beliefs that they do. So that's fine. Again, this really comes down to a business deciding what it stands for. If you stand for X, then you're going to only want to attract employees that believe X. If you stand for Y, you're only going to want to attract employees that believe in Y. But what you don't want to do is say you believe in X when you really do Y. He talks about anticipatory customer service, creating a questionless experience. So I'm actually going to read a passage from the book here. This is page 71. And he says here, he wants to convey the power of what he calls anticipatory customer service, which means answering a question or fulfilling a need that the customer hasn't even voiced, perhaps because the customer doesn't want to be a bother or doesn't know enough about the subject to formulate a request in words, or doesn't even realize they have such a need. And so this is a really important point. I saw it raised in the book Never Lose a Customer Again by Jerry Coleman, where he talks about getting on a plane and being very stressed that his luggage may have not made it onto the plane, and then he got a text message from Delta telling them that it did. So it's trying to think of questions the customer may have, or stress points or anxiety points, and kind of addressing those proactively. And those are the things that there are other things as well, but those are the key things that will really elevate an experience from just meeting expectations to wow, that was above and beyond. And those are the kind of things that can go viral. He talks about a phrase called hedonic adaptation, and he says it's a force to be reckoned with when trying to maintain customer interest and engagement. I'm going to read another passage from the book for you now. So this is from page 100. He says there's an inherent tension between innovation and tradition, and it's hard to get the mix right, to update the customer experience without changing your brand's essential nature. It requires maintaining a rigorous level of consistency while constantly adding newness and a little surprise, freshening the experience without changing its core identity. And what he means is that this phrase, hedonic adaptation, refers to the way that humans adapt to changes. So you make your experience a lot better, and then people just adapt to it, which is why I hate it when people keep saying the only way to win at customer experience is to continually surprise and delight, because you're going to go off a hedonic adaptation cliff if you keep doing that. So what he's saying is you don't consistently raise it, you have to do it in a very measured way and sprinkle in new little things here and there so that it always still feels fresh. And I think that's a really important takeaway from this book. He says have a CX risk register with pre-planned responses. Now, risk register is my terminology because I come from a project management background. He uses a different phrase in his book, but let me read you the passage that this relates to. So this is from page 117. He says service recovery systems kick in when your company, your customers, or some uncontrollable force like the weather introduces a wrinkle into the service experience you are intending to provide. A great service organization will recognize these inevitabilities and establish systems ahead of time for handling a variety of predictable service calamities, providing clearly defined solutions for each. Such systems allow your employees to serve customers in the best possible way in the face of a particular type of stressor. And then he goes on to say in an example, if you're in the restaurant business, it's only a matter of time before an employee spills a drink on one of your guests, a waiter rings in the wrong order, a chef cooks a steak to the wrong temperature, or the cork in the bottle of wine turns out to be spoiled. Because these situations are predictable and recurring, a response sequence can be prepared ahead of time, ready to be implemented when the inevitable comes about. When these fixes go above and beyond customer expectations, it can turn the resolution of such glitches into opportunities to generate deep customer loyalty and powerful word of mouth. He advocates for replacing word-for-word scripts with a beat sheet for each touch point. Again, beat sheet is my terminology. It comes from the screenwriting world, as I used to be part of the film business, and I think a beat sheet is a much more appropriate terminology than what Micah used in the book. Basically, in a screenplay, you'll have a number of beats or key moments where certain things are supposed to happen. And likewise, what he's basically saying in his book is rather than having people sound like the Stepford wives, I think that's the example he calls it, Stepford service. What you're doing is you're allowing people to be themselves and use their own kind of idiosyncrasies and their own strengths, and you just basically give them a beat sheet. These are the things that need to happen, the kind of questions you need to ask, the kind of things you need to ensure happen. So it creates a much more organic customer experience. And my final point is, and I mentioned this earlier on, is read a book called The Customer Service Revolution by John R. DeJulius. Read that book first, then read this book. The two of them together actually make a great little couplet, and I think if you're a service delivery lead, these two books together will give you everything you need. Up until now, that book I've pretty much viewed as the Bible of customer service. Think of it as the cake, if you will. And think of Micah's book, Ignore Your Customers and They'll Go Away, as the icing on the cake. And the two of them together, I think, would make a great complementary read together. That's just my personal recommendation, but I think you won't go wrong in that regards, and you'll come up with lots of really interesting ideas. So I hope that review was helpful. If there's any more reviews that you'd like to see from my channel, just drop me a line at the email address below, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.